It is everyone's favorite segment, Soundbite. Kids forget what Soundbite is. It is where Steve and I take a listen to any sort of post-game interview, a podcast clip, whatever the case may be. If someone says something interesting that we want to take a listen to, we listen. Two of our, if not the two biggest sports idols in both of our lives, Nick Wright and Chris Broussard of First Things First, have said some things that Steve and I clearly just don't agree with. Nick Wright and Chris Broussard have said that Nikola Jokic is firmly in the top 20 NBA players of all time.
No, he's not.
So before we get into what we think, in case you can't already tell what that is, let's take a listen to Nick and Brew saying some things.
I think he's firmly in the top 20.
I agree with that.
If he doesn't win more, it'll just stop him from like he's doing stuff that could get him on the periphery of the top 10. Especially if he wins championships, then you're really talking about getting him in there. So that's where I feel on that. I think he's set in the top 20.
So there you have it. That is Nick Wright and Chris Broussard saying that Nikola Jokic is one of the 20 greatest players ever. Steve and I clearly do not agree with this notion. We have actually in the last 2 or 3 weeks brought up our top 30 NBA players list quite frequently. In case you forget, here it is. This is just our top 20, which is what we're focusing on. I had mentioned last show and maybe the show before, Steve and I in the summer will be really doing a deep dive into where Jokic ranks firmly all time. But we know for sure he's not top 20. We can go back and forth talking about why we think Nick and Brew are wrong. So let's just start with 20 and go to 15 because he ain't getting past that.
There's a lot of reasons he's not ahead of Dwayne Wade, but the biggest one for me is Dwayne Wade is the true definition of a champion and what a champion is. Yeah. Dwayne Wade taught the best player of all time how to win. He elevated Miami in his second or third year to a finals and won finals MVP with an aging Shaq and a decent cast around him. Dwayne Wade is one of the greatest winners, in my opinion, of all time.
I mean, I just talked about D Wade and Harden last week, and if you're teaching the GOAT how to win, I don't know how much more of a plus that can be on your resume. I mean, there was someone who commented on that video. D Wade could have had the argument for being the best player in the league. Now, I don't agree with that, but certainly could be on the board. Dwayne Wade also in the conversation for maybe the best player ever to never win an MVP.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. So, D Wade, like you said, the ultimate winner, the ultimate champion, knows what it takes, rises to the occasion, clearly not things that Jokic has. Above D Wade, David Robinson, which I think some people will be more okay with if they're not aware. But David Robinson, who had a claim, or I should say you can make the argument, the best center in the era of the greatest centers of all time. Now, again, debatable who you want to have there, probably Hakeem for a good portion of it. And another thing about David Robinson that Jokic can't even sniff, 8-time All-NBA defense. Jokic has one claim to a share of a vote for an All-NBA defensive team. And David Robinson being the first franchise, or I shouldn't say the first, George Gervin might have a claim to that, being the first, let's say, largely recognized Spurs superstar, showing Tim Duncan how to win and getting that historic franchise rolling. David Robinson, for a lot of people, I think, goes under the radar and goes underappreciated.
David Robinson was one of the most physically gifted specimens on the court. David Robinson would go to war with the Shaqs, the Karl Malones. I mean, he was banging in the post with the best of all time, guys who are on this list ahead of him, and he won an MVP in those eras. David Robinson was also a consummate professional. David Robinson was not a bad person. He was in the Navy. He had to serve 2 years before even being able to play in the NBA. So, David Robinson, for me, is somebody who is underappreciated, I think, at sometimes. But I think once people remember who he is, they're like, oh, wait, yeah, David Robinson was crazy.
The next person, I also think people are going to be like, Jokic is way better than this person, but they don't understand the history of the game with Oscar Robertson, the Big O, the original Mr. Triple-Double. And again, something that Jokic has never displayed to us that Oscar Robertson has is it was not just empty numbers and stats with Oscar Robertson. It was directly reflecting on helping the rest of the team and elevating to another place. I mean, also Oscar Robertson helping get the career going of Lou Alcindor out in Milwaukee to get their franchise's first championship. And people like to dog on the 60s and say that, again, I think people will find a lot of holes in trying to make the argument for Jokic over Oscar Robertson. But if you go back and look at the history of the game and see what Oscar Robertson did and what he was about, I don't know how strong of an argument you can make for Jokic being over him.
Oscar Robertson, you already know how I feel about him. 8 consecutive first-team All-NBAs, I believe, is what his was it 8?
Let me look. I'm gonna look. I'll pull up his page while you're going.
All right. Anyways, I'm pretty sure he had 8 first-team, consecutive first-team All-NBAs. Jokic right now, I believe, is at 4 or 5. He'll probably get another one this year, but still doesn't have as many as Oscar Robertson. But at the same time, what Oscar Robertson, like you just said, one thing a lot of these guys have ahead of Jokic is they've molded another superstar. Now, maybe Oscar Robertson didn't mold Kareem's game, but how much of how to play the game and how to play it the right way and being a mentor to Lou Alcindor was Oscar Robertson. So that's something that Jokic doesn't have, that intangible, and that's something we do see in Oscar Robertson.
He's got 9 straight first teams, by the way. I looked it up.
There we go.
So, number 17, who Nick and Brew also in that same clip say is outside of the top 20, and in my opinion, by everyone, is underrated, and Karl Malone. One thing about Karl Malone that I always appreciate is, first of all, he's top 3 in all-time scoring.
I think he's
top 5. I mean, minimum top. I know he's up there. He's up there in the all-time scoring list. I forget his exact place, but he is definitely top 5. Just like I said about David Robinson, winning MVPs in that era is certainly not nothing. And before LeBron, Karl Malone was the blueprint for longevity in professional athletes. You had said to me today, which I don't know if I actually knew this, was it the oldest player to win an MVP or to be, was that what it was?
Yep.
And Karl Malone also has a large portion of the season where he is of his career, where he is averaging 29, 30 points a game. Again, when you're talking about the 90s and the Jordan era and how tough it was to score, that is not nothing, especially for big men. I think Karl Malone goes criminally underrated, and he certainly should be in top 20, in my opinion, or in our opinion.
Karl Malone had 11 consecutive first-team All-NBAs. Karl Malone has finished top 5 in the MVP voting 9 times in his career. Karl Malone is somebody who, is he the best player to never win a ring? Is he one of the best players to never win a ring? He's on that list. The duo of him and John Stockton was one of the greatest duos in NBA history, and Karl Malone is a large portion as why John Stockton is the all-time assists leader.
Oh, yeah.
Karl Malone is light years ahead of Jokic, in my opinion. Now, Cam, I want to stop right here and ask you a question. If we're saying that Jokic isn't top 20, right? Because we both agree, what does he need to do to get to top 20?
I need to see something other than numbers. I need to see a tangible set of games, series, moments that I can look at and say, wow, that is not something everyone can do. I respect Jokic's numbers. I respect his game. And, my big thing forever with Jokic was, I got to see it, and then I'll give you credit. He has shown it to me. I've seen it. I haven't seen all of it. One thing that all these guys we're talking about has over Jokic is that when the playoffs start, like we always say, when the lights are brightest, what separates the goods from the greats are those moments and are those series where we can see what they're truly about. We haven't gotten that from Jokic. We just simply haven't. The best argument for Jokic is he has created his own archetype. There is now players where you can say he is like a Jokic. And that is special within itself, but it can only get you so far. As we've said for years, the further you go up the ladder, the more nitpicky we have to be. So again, Jokic's game is great. I respect Jokic for what he's done and what he is doing, but unfortunately, to go higher up, you got to do more, and he's just not doing it.
You know, when I look at Nikola Jokic, one, I know he's a 3-time MVP, potential 4-time MVP this year. The problem here, folks, is I don't really count his first 2 MVPs. To me, it's the same argument as like a Steve Nash when he won his first 2 MVPs. Jokic's most recent MVP, I do agree with. I believe Giannis should have won the first and Embiid should have won the second, and that is not my Philly bias. That's truthfully what I believe. Listen to the sound. I listen to the sound.